Hello, everybody. Welcome to Branding Bud Live, the live stream that's 100% THC, 0% WTF. Every week we bring business people to talk about the business of cannabis. I'm David Paleschuck, the founder of Branding Bud Consulting Group and the author of Branding Bud, the Commercialization of Cannabis, the first book on cannabis branding. And I'm here with my co-host, Adriana Hemans, an expert in marketing and cannabis with over 8 years in the cannabis industry. Hello, Adriana. How are you today?
Hi, David. Super excited about today's show. I just want to mention a couple of things for people who may be joining us for the first time ever, that this is a highly interactive show. We like to describe it as productive distractions for the cannabis industry. So if you are listening in, watching in, please feel free to drop your comments, questions in the chat, or just say hi and introduce yourself, or tell us if you have any tips for what to buy for Secret Santa. Any and all interaction is welcome.
Right on. I'm excited about today's show. We've got a lot to talk about. Everything from equity, commercialism, capitalism, cannabis, and how it all flows together. And our guest today is Tyme Ferris. He's the co-host of the Queer in Cannabis podcast and the founder and CEO of the Pantheon Collective, a cannabis lifestyle brand forging the way for conscientious capitalism through cannabis. That's a mouthful. And we're excited because he has done an awful lot. Everything from being a leader in the cannabis industry across multiple states to being an LGBTQ activist. He has participated in the cannabis industry for almost 2 decades now across multiple states, which include Colorado, Massachusetts, Vermont, California. And now he's back in his home state, New York, which is my home state too. So go New York. And he's doing his thing upstate New York and in the city, and really bringing an activism or activist approach to the New York market, trying to make sure that the folks in New York have learned from the states and the other things that are going through. I know, Adriana, you're super excited to talk about that as well. You've been sort of involved in a lot of conversations surrounding New York and what's taking place there. So we'll get to that in a bit. Let's bring out Tyme.
Hi, Tyme. Welcome.
Hey guys, thanks for having me. Super excited to be on here.
Thanks for joining us despite the 16-degree weather in New York. I hope you're staying warm out there. And just to kick us off, I would love to hear a little bit about you that you can share with our audience. Tell us about yourself and what you're passionate about.
Sure. I guess my biggest passion is cannabis and what I'm doing and building businesses and doing good. So I guess my resume is my go-to for that, with telling people who I am. So I've been in the fashion retail world for years. I've been in cannabis space for almost 2 decades. Started off in the first of 2 medical programs out in Colorado. And then since then went through the more regulated version, then was there for Amendment 64, which I still say we beat Washington by about 3 minutes in being the first one to have full adult use legalization. Some people differ. But I've really found my home in all of this, in cannabis and this community, this industry, and feel that there's a lot of growing, no pun intended, still to be done, and looking forward to be a part of that here in my home state.
You know, it's funny, we're both from New York, and yet you were in Colorado and I was in Washington. So the 2 New Yorkers might very much have differing opinions, but nonetheless excited to be part of that at that time, because that was pretty early on.
Yeah, and it's been great to watch it stumble and fall and succeed and pick up momentum. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah. I just want to call out, there's a couple of awesome people that are chiming in. I see.
Hi, Jordan. Hi, Anthony.
Yep. And Jordan, I was refraining from making comments about Tyme's name, but you had to do it, didn't you? Anyway, welcome, Anthony. Tyme, you've been an activist. You've been involved in cannabis activism and entrepreneurship, as well as the LGBTQIA plus community. Um, can you tell us how those are intertwined, or if they're intertwined at all?
They're 127% intertwined, 420% even, largely because both of these, we're talking about fringes of society. We're talking about marginalized groups, whether it's LGBTQ plus or any other minority-based group, and what we have to do, and being supportive of all each other. It's about unity of both, that our success is super intertwined, that one can't grow without the other. And I know we're going to be talking about social equity in a little bit, but that is one of the points that I think is super important in all of that, is all of our different marginalized groups, whether it's cannabis smokers versus the norms or nons or LGBT or whatever it is, that we've all been in these fights for so long to keep our heads above water and competitive with everyone else. And obviously I'm low man on the totem pole as a white dude. But as an LGBTQ plus person, I definitely still exist in there, as not always being held as an equal to my peers, especially in this space, especially as early as I came into the cannabis industry. We're finally raising above those brand norms of the dude bro culture. And when it was those beginning times, it was not pleasant being the only gay guy in the room of everybody else. So I've really found that rising up both is important, that both of these, using cannabis, whether it be for a recreational purpose or whether it's for a medicinal reason, the fact that we have this natural element that we can all be benefiting from internally in our bodies, as well as economically and as a society we can be benefiting from, ends up being just as equally as important, that we're breaking down these stigmas of all marginalized groups, and especially, again, the stuff that I do with LGBTQ plus activism. Right now, again, it's both the same battles. New York State has our new social equity program. Again, it's something I just keep coming back to. I know it has a special part later on, but so we're going through and we're doing this. We're saying the names of the individuals that have been wronged by cannabis prohibition. And so I've been working with Park Strategies, had a lot of help getting our voice out from Marino PR, and working with Senator Cooney and trying to get 2 bills passed to make sure that if we're going to say the names, if we're going to do it, we've got 19 different states with some form of social equity program. Only 3 of those bother naming groups that were wrong. The rest of them kind of take a very calm backdoor approach to it and just meander on the edges of economic disparity, instead of saying that we had rules and laws that were put in place in a federal level to specifically attack marginal people. So making sure that we get named with that. Sorry, all my stories are a lot longer winded than I ever intend when I start.
That's no problem at all. But I just really want to call out something really quick, not to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. We'll definitely get back to this. But I think your dad just dropped a comment in the chat, Tyme. Ken Ferris, he wrote, Tyme's name is from the Chambers Brothers song, Time Has Come Today.
Yes, that is my father. Today. Thanks, Dad. My family is always super supportive of any and everything that I do. And yes, that is where it comes from. I always tell people I'm neither herbage nor physics. I'm a hybrid of the two. So not the THYME or the TIME. And yes, it was my father came up from the song Time Has Come Today from Chamber Brothers.
I love that.
Your dad's brilliant.
I like to think so too.
So going back to what you were saying and having a need to really be specific in legislation and regulation, and too often a lot is lost in it's being really vague. One example, of course, is those laws about packaging, what's appealing to children. If you don't define it and say what it is, then it's sort of a meaningless guideline. And it sounds like that similar things are happening on the social equity side too.
Yeah, I see more momentum coming up with it. I see more states backpedaling and realizing, oh crap, I need to do something here, that it's being brought to light, and it's turning into a real sticking point, as it should be. 420%. So I'm glad to see the momentum come with it. But yeah, to closing that loop on my very long-winded answer. That's how LGBTQ plus and cannabis are my intertwined activism fortes.
You know, thank you for that. You know what's interesting too? I mean, I think there are big steps and small steps, and one of the things that just comes to mind really quickly is recently, over the course of the last year and a half, 2 years, we were having the conversation both online and in the real world about the words cannabis versus marijuana. And what was interesting is we had called out on one of our shows that Washington State, as well as many other states, were using the word marijuana in their warning label. And Washington State actually changed the warning label to remove the word marijuana and use the word cannabis. And even though on some levels that's a very small step, the acknowledgement and the understanding of a state regulating body to change those small words, to make those little differences, that I think that leads to the larger discussion of how cannabis leads back to equity and leads back to race and leads back to all the other things that it touches.
Well, words matter tremendously. You know, it matters what words that we use when we talk to each other. It matters what words we choose to use frequently based on historical reference. You know, as soon as something comes out of your mouth or goes down on paper or digitally, it matters then. It exists, and it's been put out there for something other than just within your own headspace. And we need to all be remembering that, I think, a little bit more, is the power of those words and the importance of saying the right ones and moving forward with that.
So speaking about the power of words, could you define for us conscientious capitalism?
Simply put, it's just do the freaking right thing, folks. You know, it's about the fact capitalism has turned into this almost a dirty word for a lot of people right now, although it's also a foundation of which the United States is built on, right? And so why it's a dirty word is that we've allowed it to, instead of turning into something that encourages competition and helps rise up and pushes forward, that it's going through and just breaking it all down. So instead, with conscientious cannabis, we can still be profitable. We can still say that we're winning on that board game of capitalism to the top, but we don't have to have it happen at the expense of others. And that goes from everything from wage disparagement, the fact that a company can be worth millions of dollars, have a CEO that's making millions of dollars, but it's still, when you look at the company as a whole, you feel of good conscience that there's that much of a difference, hundreds of thousands of percentages from what your base level employees, that you're still using an archaic system like minimum wage to be just your start all, and not taking a look at one putting back into them. It's that continuation of the Reaganomics era and the trickle down that we all know does not work anymore, yet so many of us are still pounding, trying to say that we need to be doing that. We need to care about protecting Elon Musk's ability to pay taxes or what have you. So we need to bring it back down to those basics. We need to think about our communities first. Instead of investing more in the stock market, if you are a profitable company, how about investing in a local business that's somewhere in your town that your dollar actually technically stretches further for you on your investment, and you still have a level of oversight with it because it's there in your community. And how much do you see sales come up, especially when you're dealing in retail environments, when you change the conversation to being like, if I can bring more traffic to Billy's thrift store over here and the restaurant over there, or whatever it is that's in my general geographic vicinity, that's all added foot traffic back into your own pocket. And start thinking of profitability as far as how it comes as a result of doing good. I think that's a real core of conscientious capitalism. And I think cannabis is the perfect spot to really start to develop that. We're the baby industry as industries go. I think maybe the only one that's toddler size compared to us would maybe be renewable energy sources. You know, in these mega lists of other industries that have existed some since the dawn of time. And we are coming out of this huge social stigma that we're building from now. That we have this opportunity that since we're already going to be regulated, let's start taking those regulations to the next level. And that's something that I'm really proud to call myself a New Yorker in seeing the amount of focus that New York State has put into that this is a social justice issue opening up this industry. And that we have to do the right things. And I want us to take that further. I encourage all of us, we're not both anyone that is an entrepreneur or any type of employee, if you're involved in the cannabis industry directly with sales or in an ancillary level, you have a part of this and we can all be doing it better together. And if we succeed at that in the cannabis space, while we're under these 8 million microscopes and everything else, how wonderful would it be if we can start pushing some of those points when we say that it is as important to have a safety regulation, an OSHA regulation, as it is important to have safety guards to make sure that monopolies aren't dominating our industry and literally raping our people, to find that happy ground in the middle, to do right by the businesses that we're creating.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. And thank you for that perspective. It occurs to me, too, that just by the very nature of how our system is currently set up, we have to be local. So that's another opportunity to like redefine the way we think about profitability and recommitting to our local businesses. I want to jump right into our stat, and I want to talk about the social equity program that we have going on in LA. And this is just an example of another audience participation thing that we want to encourage people to weigh in on. It's meant to be interactive. It's a canna choice situation. So we'll throw that slide up and we'll have audience members guess along. What percentage of the people who were granted cannabis licenses in California in 2020 were equity applicants? And this is from the LA Times, just some background for you as you can go through and look at the answer choices. A, less than 33%, B, less than 21%, C, less than 13%, or D, less than 8%. And this article came out in January of 2021. We have one guess for D, less than 8%. A couple more D's coming in. All right.
Wow.
We have some pessimistic audience members.
Yes, exactly. Wow. Quadruple D's. Boy.
I think we have a consensus.
We have a minion here.
So, Tyme, looking at this, is this, well, would you care to take a guess? What do you think?
I'm going to have to go with the masses and say D, because that's how little faith I have in our equity programs that that we have rolling out and that we're working, and the amount of focus that's on that.
I should add too, and this is some good context for our conversation, that New York is planning to give 50% of their licenses to equity applicants. Do you think that they'll be able to pull it off?
I don't doubt that the number of folks will be there. And especially some of the nice safeguards that came out with the November 21st draft regulatory packets, where they are putting some firm guardrails against the traditional MSOs, multi-state operators, coming in and trying to just take over too quickly. So I think that will allow for more people to jump in, but the program itself is sloshing around a little bit. But I think that we're going to see at least a start to it. And then my hope is that if they can continue, if we can continue that after the MSOs are allowed to come through, is the big question mark, though, still.
Yeah.
I mean, it's important that we, the cannabis industry, as a marginalized group, don't marginalize within. This shouldn't be a story about the marginalizing, within their community. This should really be about understanding what's going on and supporting, and as you said earlier, learning within our community and taking that knowledge and that experience of working together to come together as a community, as an industry. And really, the truth is, many communities and many industries coming together to build something, bigger. We talk about the cannabis industry, which means so many different things. It can be plant touching, non-plant touching. It's truly massive. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But evidence shows, even right here, that we are marginalized.
So we have 7 guesses, and they're all for option D. I think we can go ahead and show the answer, which it sounds like will not be super surprising to this group. It is indeed less than 8% of the licenses granted in California in 2020 were equity applicants. This is from the LA Times. Thanks for guessing. Sorry, I didn't have a very tricky one for you today.
Yeah, Adriana, you're normally really, really throw us off with your questions, but everybody.
How much does that say about our country, though, that it was such an easy one, that we didn't have to sit there and take a second of pause, that uniformly everyone was like, oh no, bottom of the barrel, that's where we're ranking in something that is super important.
Good point. It's surprising that it's not surprising, or kind of sad that it's not surprising.
Right. Yeah, not surprising that we're all so cynical and pessimistic. But on the brighter note, Tyme, the Pantheon Collective is working with a student in particular at the University of Maryland School of Pharmacy to develop, really a program for first-time cannabis users. And, so as we talk about equity, I think really close, or certainly tied or bridged to this conversation, is education as well. Could you talk a little bit about, the program and specifically how it relates to first-time cannabis consumers?
Yeah, so it's a really fun project that we're doing in the midst of trying to fundraise and prepare for an application and all that other free time. But it's great, and it's great because of the story of how we got there too. So I was speaking at a NECAN event in Albany, and this young lady, Ashley Lasher, who is finishing up her program in the Cannabis Pharmaceutical Sciences program in Maryland, and she saw me speak. She really loved it. She has her capstone project with this that they're expanding on. And it turns out that her family is from the little town of Boonville that I am from. So it just goes to show that fate sometimes just is meant to intertwine folks. But anyway, we're working on this great project, really gearing it towards coming up with a more universal tool to be used across platforms and people and businesses and whatever specific in the cannabis industry, and with a primary focus on first-time users, or at least first-time entering into a dispensary, and really focused, because she is in a medical program, on that medical aspects. We've launched a couple surveys. We're developing this piece that will be both digital, but also be tangible to cover the age gap, to really pinpoint and make sure, because like you said, education is so critical in what we do. And one of the biggest things I would have to be honest about when we talk about education of cannabis and the cannabis industry as its polar coasts is there is a massive drop on the East Coast from the majority of dispensaries that I at least personally have been to or worked with, in the amount of attention to education, the consistency of education of the individuals that are facing the consumer on a daily basis, compared to West Coast, Colorado, California. There was definitely, your average budtender or employee or salesperson that's there was like an evangelist over the topic and could tell you anything and everything. And out here, that people are excited, but they're not taking that deep dive with that education component. And that's a whole other topic that's easy to show, because it's our generational changes of these ganjapreneurs. From when we started, that it was, the happy hippies that came in that got the first few licenses under the first few programs and were just all about cannabis and what it was, but had no business sense nor probably any right to be trying to operate a business, because that just wasn't their swim lane. Then there was the second generation folks that came through that were, in the regulated market, those of us that had some form of business background and were ready to make that jump both into something new and to make something right. And then the past 10 years, we've had this big venture capital firm ownership lingering over us that has had benefits in a few small places, but the overwhelming majority of it has bastardized our industry and stripped that education component in the interest of turn and burn dollars. And that's very evident because our West Coast ones, our Colorado or California that were established before, it's an experience to go into any one of those. And I know I'm going down a rabbit hole now. I apologize yet again.
No, don't apologize. I'm curious to know about this. Where do you see as the avenues for education? Obviously, it's very needed. And I don't think that there's any state that's like, our whole workforce is entirely educated. We're perfect. We're never going to say the wrong thing or give out medical advice. So I think there's always room to update our information and knowledge. So I'm curious what you see as opportunities there and how we can do better.
Well, for one, we need to expand on what's going on the federal level. Thank you that we just finally passed federal ability for cannabis research programs. So that will definitely tip the hat, because that is the core of a lot of the education issues for cannabis, is the fact that there aren't enough reputable sources, or at least maybe they've done, tens of thousands of different studies and written reports, but then there's so few people taking action on what is a very loaded topic with cannabis and cannabinoids and its effects, everything from growing to the human body, that we need to be expanding, taking those deep dives, but without more research, without more peer reviews. Now we can't validate those. So then we've got 10,000 reports out there, but after peer review, we would be down to just a few. So we need to get on top of that peer review first and start creating that singularity of truth as far as what our facts are on cannabis. Once we have that more firmly established, then it's about putting that into those that are making up the industry, those baseline people, put it into the executives, the ones that are pushing forward this as a commodities industry overall. And it's something that we all did when we were starting, because we were trying to prove ourselves to these regulators to say, oh no, we're on top of our stuff. So there were some great programs that came out or tried to come out from different companies in the beginning. But that VC, that MSO grouping has been more focused on trying to have placeholders for licenses across the country, not caring until at least adult use hits them if they're at all profitable. So they're not putting any attention into those employees. They're not educating them and developing them into our next successive leaders in this industry. And New York is a huge eyesore for that, in the fact that we never really launched our medical program that went legal back in 2014. We let a bunch of people go through the application process who immediately sold out to MSOs, and then they sat with them. Majority of them didn't even start construction on their operations after 5 and 6 years of holding that license. And then as we got closer and knew that the MRTA, the Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, that we just had passed here in New York last year, we were just not ready for that. Instead of building that foundation for medical, that should have been done. We should have already been getting rid of the stigmas from people on medical. We should have already, had great customer training programs that could have been rolled into the rules and regs for this adult use program. But instead, we had a stagnant medical market. We had patients that were cheated out of their medicine, and yet we're still letting these people hold their licenses, which is criminal, but that's another story. And they just keep cutting out the education. And that can be seen in Massachusetts, in Vermont, in every one of the states, that it's not an experience. They're cookie cutter models. You could be in one or the other and probably not know until you looked at your bag and saw the name that was on it. It's just turned into that instead of being. Dispensary should be a freaking magical place. I tell you what, like, it should be a place where you can feel open and welcome, that you can talk about medicinal issues as well as your mental health and everything in between. And West Coast rules at that. And I'm hoping that East Coast starts getting a little bit better.
That's really interesting. It sounds like what you're saying is that, sorry to cut you off, David, there's a lack of focus on education because of how we've shifted our focus to be more about just holding on to licenses and preparing for some future state. And then we're not sure if the information that we have is fully accurate.
I don't disagree with what you said at all. In fact, I agree with it. But one of the things that I've seen, again, being a New Yorker, living in Washington for 15 years and, going to every legal state or medical state, and seeing what's happening, is it brings me back to this one argument, which basically keeps on coming up, which is intriguing. So after I wrote my book, Branding Bud, The Commercialization of Cannabis, everybody said, or not everybody, many cultivators that I spoke to said, we don't need brands. Brands don't sell weed. What sells weed is weed. And what I've said in my response back is, and you used the word commodity a little while ago, so let's talk about basic business and the basic economics, right? Supply and demand. Well, back in the day, if your dealer came with one type of cannabis, you would take whatever that dealer showed up with, or whatever was on offer. Then at a certain point, perhaps it went, there was brown and green and you had a choice, right? And then over the course of time, we've developed these dispensaries, which are now offer choice. They're convenient, whether it's their location, whether it's their price, whether it's multiple products. But what's happened in that development is education has come, because the brands are now trying to differentiate themselves. And as the brands differentiate themselves from each other, there's more education. And so I think that's what we're starting to see, or we have seen, in the evolution of the cannabis landscape: brands, education, understanding, and these ongoing conversations. And I think they will get to the states, that are first leveling up, and coming online. But and I think those are the reasons too why these big MSOs hold their licenses, right? Because there's no need to. There's not that much choice. As soon as there is more choice, there is more competition, they'll have to differentiate themselves. And once they do that as part of what they do is education. So long story short, I know we'll get there. But I think there's some basic market dynamics which preclude us from getting there right away. And I think we'll be there, but it will take time.
It will take time. I'm glad you brought it. Like, I've read your book, and I love the indies, the outsiders, the idealists, and the traditionalists. Like, breaking down that cannabis consumer overall like that. I think speaks to also how we are going through and we're organizing these larger companies, that they're targeting those specifics, and that we're changing that narrative and that landscape, I guess, constantly. And it's largely because of equity programs and things like that we're not just, more and more people are saying not okay with how things are. And I definitely agree. Brand development, I keep telling people there's going to be 1,000 people dropping in New York with new licenses, but it's going to be your brand. It's going to be your experience. And it's about realizing that your brand is more than pretty colors, your logo, and some letters. That's a nice start, but it's what is your identity? what makes you different? Why is someone going to come into your space? And that education will come.
Right, and and in differentiation as well, which is again part of education.
So we've been talking about a lot of serious topics, but I think we're going to switch gears and do a little game, Puff or Pass, which is also a fun one for our audience to play along with. So David, I'll let you explain what the game is.
Well, the game is pretty simple and it happens really fast. So it's called Puff or Pass. Adriana is going to throw out 12 different items. If we agree, if we're vibing on it, we say puff. And if it's not our thing, if it's not our cup of tea, we say pass. We might be held to the reasoning why we've made a choice, but that's up to Adriana's call, and that will happen. We'll only have 10 seconds to call out why we may or may not puff or pass. But with that, Adriana, take it away.
Yeah, let's do it. And these are all cannabis-related products or concepts. Don't think, just respond. Puff or pass. Number one.
Feel free to chime in too.
Vegan edibles. Puff or pass?
Puff.
Puff. That was an easy one. Who would say no to that? Okay. Number two, a celebrity endorsement from Paris Hilton.
Pass.
David, I see you laughing, but I haven't heard your answer.
Do I get to hang out with her? Okay. Pass.
Sure.
Pass.
All right. Number three, shotgunning.
Pass now that COVID is a thing, but I loved a good shotgun back in my day.
Mm-hmm.
I'll pass on that.
If it's someone you know that their COVID status, maybe it's not so bad. All right, number four.
It just remind me of high school, that's for sure.
If it's sanitary, if it's done in a sanitary way, we're good. Number four, free weed for teachers.
Puff.
Puff, let's support our teachers, absolutely.
They need it, right? They need a break.
Free everything for our teachers, and let's start getting more people sticking around instead of taking tenure.
Right. Yeah, any kind of benefits we can pass along to them. Number five, virtual smoke sesh. Puff or pass?
Full pass
David?
here.
I see you thinking, David.
I'll take it. Why not? If sure, virtual sesh with the right person or people, why not?
Mm-hmm.
I just don't need one more reason to be in front of a screen on my day. It's just, let's just all go get together and then we'll pass the Dutchie on the left-hand side. So.
Agreed.
Zoom fatigue can apply even to smoking weed. All right, number six, the DARE program.
Pass. The idea has its place, but its execution is more than poor.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. That's why it failed. So yes, do we need a program to educate our youth on cannabis and other drugs? Absolutely. The way it was executed is terrible, and that's why it failed.
Yeah. It was basically like, if you do drugs, and they wouldn't even say what the drug was, if you do drugs, you'll become an axe murderer. All right, number seven. Ashtrays, puff or pass? Indoor, I should mention. I should qualify that. Indoor ashtrays.
I actually have a lovely collection of mid-century modern ashtrays that I rather cherish. So I'm going to puff on that.
Okay.
Likewise, my Jonathan Adler collection, is standing.
I am surprised by that. I thought I would get a pass from both of you on that one. Interesting.
No,
Okay,
I'm a bad cannabis person. I smoke tobacco too. I know it's horrible, but yeah.
Ooh.
Oh.
Don't worry. You can still be
I hate myself enough for it.
We'll refrain from passing judgment on you. All right. Number 8, dispensaries offering wedding registries. Puff or pass?
I actually have to think about this one. You know
what do you think, David?
I'm going to pass. I'm going to pass on it. Let's keep a few things traditional. Let's get you that
for a minute.
Let's get you that good china you're never going to use and is going to sit in the box in the attic until you're gone. Let's stick that way.
Wow. I go the other way, although I do have a caveat, which is the couple that's getting married are both 21 and over, right? So,
Okay.
so there's
Fair
that.
point.
But sure, why not? I mean, think about perhaps how cannabis might bring a couple more together than that dusty old china set that's sitting in or silver set that's sitting in the living room somewhere.
Nobody
So
wants a Keurig. Okay.
I say puff.
All right. We got one puff and one pass. All right. Number 9, tobacco companies investing in cannabis.
Pass.
I know it's inevitable, so God, I don't want to say puff, but it's one step closer toward normalization and regulation and where we need to get. It's just part of it. So I'll say hesitantly, I will say puff.
Interesting. Divisive. Okay. Audience, chime in and let us know if you agree with this or not.
Right. Don't hate me for that, audience.
Number 10, tourism. Some tours of Murder Mountain. Puff or pass? First reaction.
Pass.
Yeah, love tourism, hate murder, or dislike murder.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah, I'll pass.
Okay, got a consensus on that one. We have 2 left. Next one, infused beef jerky. Puff or pass?
Puff. Definitely. I love my cured and smoked meats more than anything in the world. With a good cheese and a cracker, I'm there.
Nice. I love it.
Such enthusiasm. Is it gluten-free? I'll try it. Sure. Puff.
Okay, all right. We have a couple beef jerky fans. And then last one,
correct?
puff or pass, the word strain. I see a lot of thinking and not a lot of responding.
I'm going to pass because I feel that the science of it and where we are genetically and what it's not really. I like coming back to that truth or that fact component, and strains getting a little gray.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll let's step it up. I'll pass on the word strain and hope to use the word cultivar or some other more appropriate word.
All right, you heard it here. Strain is out, cultivar is in. Changing hearts and minds and branding Bud Light.
The new word for 2023 of the Oxford English Dictionary, right?
I think we only really have time left for one more question for time. So do you want to throw one out there, David?
I do. And I know I'm the author of a book, so I don't mean it in any way along the lines of my book. But would you recommend a book or a movie or an experience or just something that you have experienced that you feel would benefit our listeners in the cannabis industry?
So in prep, I thought of a book, but now I kind of want to talk about an experience. So I think that everyone should just read in general the Kabbalion. Very ancient piece of like a cult type, but it just really, it's a nice check-in on what reality is. And as far as experience, I as somebody that is from a very small town like Boonville that went out and has bopped across all over the place since, I can't emphasize to anybody, whether you're a cannabis entrepreneur or just somebody that's working in cannabis or just a human being in general, just go someplace else, step out of your comfort zone, have those experiences, go to the place that makes you want to cringe a little bit or that you think that you would never dare go to just push your comfort levels. Because everybody's uncomfortable right now and we need to all get over it and start getting on a pace together. So that's my experience portion. But read the Kabbalion. It's very prophetic.
How do you spell that? I'm writing it down.
Kybalion.
Awesome. Thank you.
I believe. It's based on like the Hermetic principles, like ancient Egypt and ancient Greece. So it's all about the focus of what is reality and really kind of bringing that into.
And I love that because that touches upon a lot of what I've been thinking and talking about lately, which is the death of curiosity. That nobody travels anymore. Nobody is curious about new things. Nobody even in a disagreement. Nobody even says, help me understand why you're thinking what you're thinking. You know, now it's just a quick shut off. It's a quick no. It's a quick, we're different. And I think we could do better in our industry, and we could do better amongst ourselves. That said, that we have run out of time for our show today. 45 minutes goes really quick when we've got great people with great experience that we could talk about not only cannabis, but life in general. So
I feel like we solved all the world problems today. I think we're good to go.
We put a dent to them at least.
That's right, we did. Well, Tyme, thank you for joining us. We truly appreciate your time. Sorry, and thank you. And we look forward to seeing some of the great things you're working on and continuing to stay in touch. Thanks so much.
Thank you guys so much. This was wonderful. Cheers.
Bye.
Well, that's, as we just said, that's it pretty much for our show today. We've got some great shows coming up. Next week, we've got Jason McHugh from Califari. Califari is a California-based company doing amazing things across a whole line of products, everything from flower and cannabis all the way through to apparel and NFTs and posters. They've done some great things, charity programs recently. So we're going to be talking about art and the overlap of art and cannabis and how that comes to form lifestyle. And we'll be speaking with Jason McHugh next week, and we're super excited about that. Lastly,
drop a link in the chat so you can register for next week's episode.
Yep. And one last thing, I just want to throw a shout out to the ArcView group. They had an amazing show, an amazing event last week in Miami. They're going to do another one early next year in San Diego. So I just would encourage everybody to take a look at ArcView and what they're doing, what they're offering to the industry, and take a look because it's important. That's it for today. Thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for participating. Adriana, thank you so much. Tyme, thank you. And to our team behind the scenes, thank you very much. Have a great week, and we'll see you next Thursday.
Bye.
Bye-bye.